Welcome to hashtag 52 Boundaries. And this week we are talking about difficult conversations. And I am so delighted to have with me my friend Tess Brook, who is a brilliant communication and change specialist. Hi, Tess. I'm so
Hi,
happy.
Angela. Wonderful to be working with you. Woo-hoo.
Yes. Okay, so we're talking about the boundaries around difficult conversations. And it's a topic that's really topical at the moment, right? Because, and when we're talking about the soft boundaries, when people really don't have any boundaries, one thing that people seem to do a lot these days is ghosting.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, people just go missing in action, and that leads to a whole pile of other things. But what other things aren't I being told? I'm being excluded, and it just snowballs, absolutely snowballs.
And then all these conversations that are so important in not only establishing the relationship, but also strengthening the relationship just don't happen.
No. And it creates a toxic relationship very, very quickly. Very, very quickly.
Okay, so can you describe to us what a toxic relationship looks like? Because
a toxic relationship is a relationship that is unhealthy. It's unhealthy for one or both of the. Well, it's unhealthy if you cannot have a conversation. You need to be able to have that conversation. Otherwise, it's going to eat you up or eat them up or both. And the longer you leave it, the recovery is just like almost impossible, especially when it's values-based. If you cross someone's values, then quite often, if people understand your intention, where you come from, you can actually, hey, that wasn't my intention. I was trying to be helpful. And but you stepped into my space, soft boundaries. You stepped into my space. Oh, we didn't mind last time I did it. Or actually I did, but I didn't say so. Have those conversations. Don't let a relationship slide because it's a soft boundary. You go, they should know me. Don't they understand? Well, nobody has a crystal ball nowadays. And communication has got a lot worse over online mediums and stuff like that. We're losing all the visual cues. We're losing the softer, actually the audio is getting better. You're not losing the non-verbals, because we tend to mask the verbal, let me try my words. We tend to mask the visuals. So it's soft boundaries lead to these toxic relationships.
It's those relationships where there's, for me, that's where people don't articulate their needs, where they're just going, again, as you said, the mind reading, but you should know what I want, but they don't say anything. They just expect the other person to go, I know exactly what you need and I'm fulfilling that. And we can talk about therapy and how that goes back to unfulfilled childhood needs and all of that, but that's not the point. The point is that it's that inability to actually say, I'm starting to feel really resentful here.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't even feel that. They don't even know what that means. They just go, oh, this person is not fulfilling my needs, but they don't even articulate that. They just go, this isn't working for me.
Yep. And it can be, in a work context, it can be as simple as like, look, I need that report. And if you're more specific around, I need that report by 3 p.m. Friday, because I've got to include it in my report up. But if you say, hey, when am I going to get that report? And that's actually giving them a boundary to work to, which actually helps them and helps you improve your relationship. You go again.
Or you didn't take the garbage down, And it's like, did you ask me to take the garbage down? No.
Even better, you never take the garbage down.
Oh, yes.
Never? What do you mean never?
Yes. And off we go.
So I'll share a funny story about unmet needs. When my husband and I first started living together, we had this, we fell into this habit of whoever got out of the bed last made the bed. And so I used to, I'm an early riser, so he would end up making the bed. And some mornings I go into the bedroom and go, okay, he's made half the bed. He's made his half. And I'm going, what? And other mornings I'd go in and the bed would be fully made. And it's like, I don't get this. And like after 2 or 3 weeks of this happening, and I didn't really want our first argument to be over like making the bed. And I spent 2 days, but it was really annoying me because like I used to like the place being absolutely perfect. You know, I'd been living on my own for a while. There was no mess, no clutter. And it's like, not that he's like messy or does clutter, but it's like I spent 2 days practicing my really relaxed voice and going, hey, baby, what's with the making half the bed business? And he goes, oh, it's easy. When I get up in the morning, I make my half. And then when I put my shoes and socks on before I go to work, I make your half. And his shoes cabinet was on my side of the bed. And I was like, oh, so he had a need for efficiency and I had a need for beauty, apparently, or a Vogue magazine.
So you would come in the interval between the two.
Yes. And here's the kicker. This is the kicker. He went, baby, did you ever stop to think that when you got home from work, the bed was always made? And I went, no. Oops. Okay. And so we had different ways of going about it, but we were getting really, he didn't even know I was getting annoyed. But it's like sometimes we lose sight of the end goal and we let our boundaries and our needs. And if I didn't communicate with him, but once I knew his process, oh yeah, that makes sense. I didn't even care once I understood how he went about it. So.
And that's when we're already in rigid boundaries, because when somebody's in rigid boundaries, it's like saying, you didn't make the bed. You're not making the bed according to my expectations. And would you please change that? Or I demand that you change that. Or you're making me feel, my favorite expression, you make me feel. You make me really angry when you don't make the bed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing with rigid boundaries is you're setting the conversation up to fail immediately. You've already framed it so that they are not going to be able to meet your needs. So it's like, as soon as you say, you didn't, you haven't, it's an accusation. And unless someone's able to say, hey, can we just step back a bit, help me understand what's going on here? Or as my husband said, oh, didn't you realize that when you got home? But no, you didn't, you should have, you're in trouble. You're in a fast, slippery slide down. So rigid boundaries are set to fail. And especially if people put an ultimatum on, like a time frame ultimatum, because that's going to start building pressure as the time goes. And it's like, well, lines in the sand, you're going to have it out one way or the other. And if you're the one that's put the rigid boundaries in, you need to have your strategy on how you're going to handle it, because you may not get your way.
And there's a big difference between saying to somebody, would you please finish this report by this and that time, versus saying, if you don't finish that report by this and that time, then or there will be consequences, or.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to be aware of the impacts of our language. And it's very easy to say, oh, it's their fault, they haven't given me the report. And like factually, they haven't given you the report. But if we use that language, we are then shifting the conversation to a different level. So we have to be accountable. We can't just say it's their fault. I was talking to one client who said, oh, it's all that person's fault. I haven't spoken to them for 3 months. And I said, what did you just say? Oh, I haven't spoken to them for 3 months. And I said, sorry, I think you have. No, I haven't. And I said, I think you've said, shut up, off. I don't want to talk to you. That sounds pretty loud and clear to me. And that person went, oh, okay, interesting. And so I think one of the challenges around these boundary conversations is being accountable with ourselves. And I think it's a big challenge because it's there's a duality between your boundaries are formed by your experiences, and we get anchored into those emotions and get anchored into those experiences, so that your boundaries are like, they're almost part of your DNA, because you can anchor back to, oh, here we go again. That same person hasn't given me that report. I'm using a very simple example, but we're immediately taken back to how we felt when we were in front of the boss and he's going, well, how come you haven't got this report finished? And we take that into the next conversation. And so, and we get put back into that experience where I haven't got the report. We anchor back to that. And it's like, we start this whole process of how we approach the conversation based on our past experiences. And so we need to be aware that we can shift the dialogue, we can change the outcomes. We might not get the report, but if we change how we interact with the individual, then we may get a different outcome.
So what you've said, it's the words, but it's also the body language and the tonality, and we've talked about that at length. And it's the ability to manage that. So it's and if you've got somebody who's got very rigid boundaries and comes from that judgmental place of I'm right, they often have very, and I'm using the word very non-descriptively, aggressive body language. So they're in somebody's space, they may make threatening gestures that, or lean back. Or lean in, so they're not mindful of personal space, or they might have really loud and really aggressive, like really harsh tonality. And then you've got somebody, if you pair that up with somebody who's got very soft boundaries, who doesn't know how to handle that, that's not a great combination. And there's zero communication.
So for everybody to have a different outcome, you have to want the outcome more than the pain you're going to go through to try and change how you communicate. And if you change something slightly different, these people are going to be like expecting what they've received from you in the past and go, oh, that's a little bit different. Oh, okay. And you're shifting the dimensions for them slightly, and they may take a different approach. They may not. And it's easy to say it failed. Well, if it didn't work, you try again. But, you've got to want the outcome more than the pain that you're going to go through. Because it's going to be uncomfortable, because you're throttling your brain that wants to throttle them while you're wanting your outcome. But you need to be able to go, okay, bring it down, take the emotions out of it. Be polite, be friendly, be firm. If need be is okay. It's not rude. It's, but you've got to want that outcome more than the pain and the discomfort you're going to go through and trying something new.
Yeah. And if I may add to that, it's the ability to recognize that no matter whether I win or lose, how do I want the relationship to continue after this? A lot of people just go, this is what I want, or this is what I don't want. And then they don't look beyond what happens after. Whereas when you manage it with flexible boundaries and you're able to adjust your viewpoint because there's new information coming in, babe, I make your half of the bed after or when I put on my shoes, being able to say, all right, okay, there's new information coming in that's changing my emotions. So now I can adjust my outcome, and I can remember that I want the relationship to continue afterwards.
Yes, absolutely. And with that conversation, it would have been our first argument, and that would have set up expectations on how I handled things that I was annoyed about.
Yes. Again, we teach people.
Yeah, we teach people how to communicate with us.
Yeah.
And we've got to remember that. We lose sight of that.
Yeah.
We give people permission to treat us the way we let them. So we teach them. And if we have soft boundaries and we don't push back, when we need to push back, we give them permission to do it again. Yeah. We have rigid boundaries. We're teaching them to fight with us.
Absolutely. So this now takes us straight into spongy boundaries, where we make our outcome straight into the outcome, or the conversation, or the way in which it's held is dependent on the other person.
Yes.
Right? So I don't really go in there with a goal. I just see what happens. And so if the person is aggressive or, really forceful, then I might take the opposite, or I might decide that I'm going to do the exact same thing back. But it's never my decision. It's always dependent on the other person. So I can still blame.
Yeah.
I can still attack. I can still run and ghost. I can do all of these things, but it's never my fault.
Yeah. And people with spongy boundaries, going into a conversation with them, you could be walking on eggshells because you don't know what you're going to get. One day it could be, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And the next day it's like, and you go, okay, what just happened there? It's like, and you don't know whether they just need a coffee, or whether they've had a bad day, or we have no idea what's going on, or whether they worked on that project for 6 months, a year ago, and you've just thrown their stuff out the window. We have no idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so spongy boundaries, it's like we have to, I think what you've said is go in, and the other person is going to give you the clues on how to work with them. And we need to be able to be present and aware of our own responses to them. And again, present that okay, well, what are their needs here? What's going on? Hey, so it appears that, you know, you're like one day they might be okay, and next day they're like not. It appears that this is important to you, not you're upset or you're angry. It appears this is important to you. Can you help me understand why? Oh, you've been working on this for longer. Can you take me into what's really important so we don't miss it? So position it around what's important to them. You learn, and then you can actually go, oh, okay, I can see why they're getting upset about this. And sometimes you still have to go down that path, but they may feel heard, they may feel appreciated, they may feel understood. Boundaries are like, they're challenging to work with because you don't know what they are, but it's a good, like, okay, be present.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you go to work, or it's a little bit harder now online, a lot of people are online, but when you could see a colleague walking down the corridor before they even put their bag down on their desk or whatever, you can tell whether they're happy, they've had a good morning, whether they've been stuck in traffic, or, and like we can observe that more generally, but we stop doing that when we set into an intentional conversation, because we get in there with our own interests and we want to go. So we need to sort of step back and go, okay, check in how they're going, what's happening to them.
Yeah. Again, it's the body language and the tonality that we often, I mean, it's so much, it's the largest part of our communication, but we ignore it. Or when we react to it, it's not a considered response, but it's like, that blurting, you're really angry, right?
Yeah.
Or you're really stressed, instead of saying, hey,
I'm not stressed, I just want this done.
Yeah. Again, when you see a colleague coming in, and you probably notice that the shoulders are hunched, the corners of the mouth are turned up, or pale skin color or anything like that. And saying, instead of saying, so you're really stressed, it's about saying, so how are you this morning? And when they go fine, with their various acronyms behind that, right? Let's stay with feelings inside not expressed.
Yeah.
About saying, okay, often the question, is there anything I can do to help? Or what do you need right now? Will shift the conversation. And again, depending on the relationship, I mean, it will enable the person to say, you know what, I am feeling stressed right now. I could really do with some help.
Yeah. And I think one of the really good tips that I tell my clients is, if you going into a conversation and you're feeling stressed because you don't know what they're going to get, and you know that you react to them, we tend to start going in and we get smaller and smaller, get a little voice, and we like get whinnier and whinnier. And even though you feel that inside, if you take your hands and open, like if you're sitting at a desk or behind a computer, take your hands palm up and open it out. You can see you're opening your chest and your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And you're giving a non-verbal that says you're comfortable and relaxed. You may still be feeling like this, but you're opening up your body and you're being less defensive or reactive to them.
Yeah.
And if you just drop your jaw just a little, and it changes the tone of your voice.
Yeah.
It relaxes it a little, and it's just like, and so you don't have to seem to.
And sorry, when you're listening, we often push the tip of our tongue to the roof of our mouth, which creates a lot of tension. So if you relax your tongue and you just, again, your shoulders and open up, you literally start listening from a different place.
Yeah. I think the other thing when you're in these difficult conversations is, people think that you need to get an outcome from the conversation, and conversations can be several conversations or two conversations, and it could be, okay, to achieve this, what do you need from us or our team or from me, etc. I'll let you go away and think about it, and I'll go away and work on what you've just asked for, and then we can come back together and work out how we're going to finish this, work out how we're going to, so you don't have to get an outcome in that conversation, but you need to leave the conversation in an open space. And so you're protecting your boundary a little bit in that way as well. You go, okay, well, it's a safe way to go, okay, I'm not up for this right now, let's come back for this.
That's the ability to have, the internal locus of control, the ability to say, this comes from me, I decide, rather than, I'm going with whatever I perceive here, which may not actually reflect reality.
Absolutely.
So the ability to say something is not quite working for me. Let's review this and let's revisit this another time. But a lot of times people, and I have this with my clients all the time, they think they have one conversation and it's done. And I go, yeah, but you have to, and I talk about the fact that you need to separate out a difficult conversation from a conversation about the conversation, where you actually talk about how you talk about these things and have an agreement that says, you know, like yesterday's conversation didn't quite work so well for me. Could we find, you know, like, again, there was this is the behavior that I've observed. Could we change that? May I request that we find a different way of dealing with that? And then the person might huff and puff and attack back, or they might do the screw this, I'm out. But it's you need to revisit this several times until you find a modus operandi where you can say, this is how we communicate. I mean, you and Marty were really lucky that you found, you know, that, as you said, argument. It wasn't an argument, it was a clarification. Right?
It could have been an argument.
Yeah, but you settled that right there and then, because he answered in a very manner.
Not right there and then. 2 weeks later, it was getting to me.
Oh, right. No, I mean, but you were able to resolve it with
conversation.
In the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. We just don't have crystal balls. As much as we think we know someone or what they're going to do, we don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah. I mean, we do know to a certain degree when we know somebody for a very, very long time, and then we can sort of predict what they're going to do, because we can literally see, okay, they're taking a deep breath in, their shoulders are coming down, but at the same time, the corners of their mouth get, and they tuck them in and their eyes get really small. They're getting themselves ready for a fight or a really loud comment or something like that. I grew up with a father like that.
Yes.
And sometimes he would manage it and it would disappear. And sometimes it wouldn't, and he would blow up completely. And it was the spongy boundaries. It was just, he just didn't know which reaction was the way in which to respond. And I learned to walk, like you said, on eggshells until I came to a place where I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And I love this concept of marshmallow coated steel, like soft and approachable on the outside, but then they hit the steel and you just go, enough.
Yeah.
So I had this with my father. He was blowing up and I went, you know what? I'm not just going to leave the room or just suffer it. I'm going to go, you know what? This is a really not the good time to have this. And when I see you stand up and start throwing a glass, I feel really unsafe. I'm out. Happy to talk to you about this tomorrow. And it's changed our relationship completely.
Awesome. I think another conversation that when we having difficult conversations and we're having conversations around boundaries is you're not always going to agree. So if you have a person who is you constantly butting heads with and you've got different boundaries, I think it's important to be able to sit down and say, how do we agree to disagree?
Yes.
You've got stuff that's important to you. I've got stuff that's important to me. Sometimes it's a chasm. And each person's view is valid. It's like the collective views are the reality of the universe, and people bring in their experiences to those views, and that's their truth. So we need to be able to learn to have conversations, how to agree to disagree. And in that, we also need to learn which ones we need to be able to go forward to a conclusion, and which ones matter and which ones you can let go.
Yeah. I mean, there's the expression, choose your battles. I don't like the battle kind of, because it has the whole, conflict, which is, if you look that up in a dictionary definition, it says you can't reconcile it, it's prolonged, it's extended, it's all of these things. Whereas if you have a constructive discussion, that changes the tone completely.
Yes.
Argument, anything like that.
And I like the expression, healthy conflict is healthy, because we can't all sit and agree. We need to be able to create space to be able to have, people associate a lot of negativity to conflict. I think we need to be able to allow people to have active disagreements in a safe way, and that it's not personal. So you can for some people they can do that, and it's not personal, they don't take it on. And you can see, I do a lot of work with lawyers, and also I've done a lot of work with engineers and academics, and you can see some of them who are very, very in their head, they get into it, and they and the people who feel as though they're arguing and it's conflict, you can see them all push back at the table, and they're like, oh, I'm just going to go to the toilet, or going to go to or whatever. And it's actually like constructive conflict. It's healthy, constructive conversations, but other people perceive it as conflict. And it's like, but they're going bang, 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 bang. And so being able to differentiate that and understand how you feel in those contexts as well.
I think that that's a really good point. I think the other thing to take into consideration is when we talk about conflict or difficult conversations or discussions, is there cultural differences. Absolutely. I know that when I have conversations with my European friends, we have much firmer opinions about things. And I know that sometimes Australians sit around the table and they go, whoa, do you fight like this all the time? No, it's a healthy discussion about, and then we agree to disagree. We toast and we go, okay, I learned something. Not sure that that's going to change my mind, but thank you for sharing.
And I 100%, I have a lot of European friends as earthlings, and I lived in France for 6 months, and I was at uni over there, and the ability to have like these really and disagree, no, dude, and being an international student there, there was probably about 15 different nationalities. We'd get together once a month on a Sunday afternoon, and pizza and guitar and everything, and we'd get into some of these really big, and it was funny. And one of the ladies was American, and as she goes, you guys are being so rude to each other, like, and because we're it's like it's a different style of conversation. So it's being aware cultural differences bring something in.
And then there's also, and I'm going to completely generalize here, so everybody who's listening to this, please forgive me, is there's sometimes they perceive gender differences as well. So when I facilitate sessions, my experience is that men will get at each other, and it can get loud. But at the end of the conversation, they will say, so who's coming for a drink? Whereas women often hold grudges. They come out of these conversations and they take things personally much more than men. And I mean, again, totally generalizing. I know a lot of women who don't do that. And I know a lot of men who also hold grudges. But there seems to be more an ability to take a difficult conversation at face value and saying, this is just the situation right now. We're just going to work it out. Whereas for women, there's almost like there's an identity involved. I don't know how to describe that, but it feels different.
I hear what you're saying. I think that and layering that with and not all men fit into that, not all women fit into that, but layering that as well with the traits that they have from their personalities. Some people are more likely to go that way than others. And I've just lost what I was about to say, so that's okay. We can continue.
Well, with culturally, women are not encouraged to speak up, or used to. I mean, I was always, my grandmother used to say to me, the woman always walks the lower path, Angela. The woman always gives in. And I would sit there and go, no, definitely.
That's why I like you. I'm the eldest of 4, and my whole family's tall, and not that you can tell here, but I'm 5'2", but I'm 6'7" in my head, just ask me. And I have never like been that submissive. It's like, huh? What?
So again, it's this whole cultural framing of what is acceptable for men. I mean, when a man is, you ask people, when a man is assertive, what is he like? Oh, he's powerful. When a woman is assertive, what she's like, oh, she's aggressive, she's a bitch, right? And so we need to shift some of the cultural references around what is a healthy conflict, this, and take that out of this gender. This is what a woman is supposed to be like. This is what a man's supposed to like. And thankfully, that's changing.
Yes.
I still think we have a long way to go. And with all that social media confusion about, like swipes left, swipe right, and, I don't even have to engage with that person. I'm just gone.
Yeah.
And at the same time, with the algorithms getting tighter and tighter and tighter and getting us into places where we just meet people we agree with. And then when somebody comes in who doesn't, it blows up. It's more important than ever to have all of these really these difficult conversations, because
absolutely. So shall we talk about flexible boundaries?
Yes. I think we have been spreading them in all along, but let's just summarize them and be really clear what they mean.
Yes. And so we need to be able to be aware of individually what the constraints are around us, and we need to be able to go, okay, well, I need to adapt. Hopefully they can adapt. And the flexible boundaries are much, much healthier. Start with intention. So it's just, it's not easy. Nothing is easy in this. If you're shifting from how you've done something for all these years, it may be how your parents taught you, it may be past experiences, it may be pain keeping you anchored in it. Start with intention, and don't be annoyed with yourself if something doesn't work. It's not going to work every time. Give yourself permission to try a few different things.
Like when I said, I changed the relationship with my father, it wasn't everything was, rainbows, unicorns, and roses afterwards. Process, but we got there eventually. But again, when somebody has flexible boundaries, there's empathy.
Yes.
The understanding, like I understand where you're coming from. I may not necessarily agree with it, but I can understand it. I can feel this because I've had that experience, and I can see where you're coming from. And then the other thing is that often, again, rigid boundaries don't have, or soft boundaries when they're in victim mode don't have. It's the ability to have remorse. And to apologize.
Yes. And then own your stuff. Be accountable for your stuff. And that's not being vulnerable to everybody that wants to have a go at you. It's about going, okay, I can see how I contributed to this, and I'm sorry for, And
then when you've got somebody who says, I can accept that, rather than saying, I'm gonna sit here now and not talk to you for 3 months.
And it could have been as simple as it appears to be a misunderstanding. Like, help me understand where you're coming from, and I'll, and it appears to be, or it appears to me to be. And then, so you're sharing with them from your view.
Because so much of difficult conversations are based on perceptions and, all of these things we've just talked about. And when you just go into that space of, let's just explore this and find out what is actually behind this, because often it has nothing to do with what's actually going on.
And flexible boundaries don't mean that you give up everything that's important to you. It's about understanding like what's acceptable to you and what's not acceptable to you. And you can say, okay, look, I can see this is really important to you. Can you lower your voice? And I'm happy to continue the conversation. It's like, it doesn't mean you become a walkover, like, or be spongy. It's like, it's okay. I'll find my way to work with this.
Marshmallow coated steel.
I like that.
Thank you so much, Tess. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for all your insights and for your practical tips. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for everybody for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. And please remember to subscribe. Thank you so much.
Remember to subscribe. Yes.